When was the last time you saw Najee Harris strike this pose? The answer is never. You've never seen Najee Harris express the emotion, the vibe, that feeling of real achievement and a meaty, successful beatdown of another team in his Steelers career, because we haven't had one. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that, but it certainly wasn't Najee Harris. And if we could point to one player who kept it real and gave everything he had, um, running into brick walls for the most part for the last three years, it's Najee Harris. And to see him so amped up and so excited, and to see the rest of the team so amped up and so excited, is something that we haven't experienced in quite some time. But for those of you who haven't been watching the game within the game, and I know a lot of folks just watch football to watch the game, see how it works out, you'd know that we haven't seen this type of expression and confidence and victory from our Steelers since 2016. Because that 2016 season ended with the typical Ben Roethlisberger white flag against the New England Patriots. Put up a few field goals early and then collapse in the second half. And we haven't had a quarterback, frankly, since then. I think maybe now we do. And what a statement by watching a game where, first of all, we weren't sitting on our hands and holding our breath for the entire fourth quarter. Second of all, where we didn't feel like we won as much as we escaped. Third of all, when it came time for the offense to finish out the game by scoring a touchdown, the offense finished out and scored a touchdown. Can you remember the last time that happened? So it's been amazing, right? That the Steelers fans seem to go through a lot of purgatory. We had a dozen years of purgatory after Terry Bradshaw. And then had a few good seasons from a pretty mediocre Neil O'Donnell and went to the Super Bowl. But then Cordell Stewart, Jim Miller, Kent Graham, whoever, way back. And finally, even though I felt like Tommy Maddox could have handled the job for 4 or 5 years, we drafted Roethlisberger, and for a few years, Roethlisberger was the real deal. Until 2009, where his character got exposed, and suddenly the big games, were all too big for him. And the playoff appearances became far less, well, they went far less deep and they became far less often. And, every off-season, Ben Roethlisberger would remind us about that Super Bowl he won a decade ago, or what have you. We never gave Mason Rudolph a real chance. Tomlin was insistent on burying him because Myles Garrett, of all people, said Mason Rudolph was a racist. And, frankly, Tomlin decided to roll with that. So he buried him. Mason never got a chance. He might get a chance now in Tennessee because Will Levis is turning out to be a pretty big disaster. But the fact of the matter is the quarterbacking, we all hoped for Kenny Pickett, but we all knew better. The quarterbacking, and that other disaster from Chicago, I don't even want to remember his name. Okay, Mitch Trubisky. I do actually remember his name. That disaster and then followed by a Justin Fields who is never going to be anything more than a backup, acquitting himself nicely, not great, nicely, because with a real NFL starting caliber quarterback, we would have been 6-0. But give Fields his due. He kept himself in check. He delivered what he had to most of the time. And he's a good young man and a solid player and a real teammate. And I want to see that guy have a job in the NFL. I still believe he's a backup, but he's a guy you want on your team. He really is. And he sort of won me over in that respect. But here's what I saw the other night that I want to talk about. We got a quarterback. I pray to God that a few of our offensive linemen get back in time to protect him. Because frankly, the pass protection was not that great last night. And we had to use a lot of designed rollouts and moves and slips to get to even get time to release the football, much less choose a receiver. But Russ acquitted himself real nicely under not so great conditions. I'll admit that first quarter he was squeezing the football pretty tight, but he seemed to come through it. But here's what's real, and here's why that guy is celebrating like he hasn't before, because this team is on the horns of an identity. This team is on the horns of having some degree of balance, of being able to score touchdowns, of being able to drive the ball down the field with plays of more than 4 yards. Russell Wilson gives you that. It was not a big leap for Tomlin to start him. Everybody wants to give him credit. I give him credit only for making the obvious choice, which came with some criticism. All that said, now that we have a quarterback, and I didn't talk about this in my other post, now it makes sense to think about going after a receiver. We had heard all of the early season, we need another receiver because Fields doesn't have weapons and George Pickens is his only guy. No. The problem with Justin Fields not throwing to more than one receiver is that Justin Fields never gets off his first read other than to take a quick check down or run. Those second and third receivers, Pat Freiermuth, the really big guy we got, they were just forgotten. They were forgotten men. And they were going to be. And why bring in another receiver to not throw to? Now we have a quarterback who, with a better caliber number 2 or number 1, sometimes I'm not sure Pickens is a 1. There's real possibility. We've got a pretty solid defense. We'll get some of our guys back. We'll get that new linebacker, who I think, frankly, is already better than 56, and Nick Herbig, whatever. We'll get that linebacker back. We'll get a few defensive backs back, and I think you're going to see some pretty interesting things. So if this week is any indication, we're going to win more than 9 games. We won 10 last year, but that was essentially Mason Rudolph carrying us on his back, and then Tomlin quickly parachuting him away without an offer. But if you watch the same game I did, what a wonderful thing to not, be holding your breath, sitting on your hands, praying to whatever God you pray to, or wishing on some crystals or what have you, to see the game in hand, to see our guys put it away, and to not have to hyperventilate until the clock runs out. That was a wonderful gift. And if you take a look at Najee Harris, something very different happened in Pittsburgh last night, and it would be wonderful if it keeps happening. So stay tuned. Oh, and like, follow, and share.